I'm Phil Hatch, test-taking expert and creator of testperfect.com. In this video, we're just going to discuss what's on the GMAT. So this is a question that we get a lot from people that have not yet really done a lot of study. What is actually on the test? And so that's what we're going to discuss here. Now, here's a preview. Okay, on the GMAT, we really have four things: math, verbal, an essay, and integrated reasoning. So we're going to talk about what each of those are and kind of maybe a little bit about how schools look at them. Okay, grad schools that you may be applying to. So the first thing that's on the GMAT is obviously math. So you're going into business school. Most of you are probably looking at an MBA or a MAC or something along those lines. And so it's probably obvious that you need to be okay at moving around numbers. Now, I do have to say, though, you don't need to be a math major to do well on the GMAT. Also, you're going to be surprised, there's very little on the GMAT that relates to business, which might seem a little counterintuitive since you're trying to get into business school. But the whole purpose here is to make the test fair for all undergrad majors. They're not just looking to have accountants become MBAs. They also want English majors and film majors and engineers, and all of these people can make fantastic MBAs and do incredible things with their combined skill set. So that's what they're looking for, is a test that's fair across the board. Now, the math on the test is really mostly back to high school math. So you're going to start with arithmetic. I guess that's more elementary school. So things like fractions and decimals and remainders and percents and ratios. They love testing those things on the test. After that, you have algebra. So you need to be solid at algebra, solving equations, moving variables around, rearranging expressions, that sort of thing. Okay? You also have geometry, which, does that have anything to do with business school? Well, I'll leave that up to you. But you need to know your formulas and kind of how the geometry is tested on the GMAT. After that, you have something I call number properties. Now, most people don't know what I'm referring to. This is stuff like odds and evens, positives and negatives, factors and multiples and prime numbers, odds, exponents and square roots. Those are tested a lot. So it's just, the basic ways numbers work. So those are tested heavily on the GMAT. After that, you have some stats. Now, this is not like a college level stats class. This is more like averages and medians and ranges and things like that. They do, however, get into things along the lines of probability and permutations combinations. Those are hard problems. They take some practice and learning to get good at them. Okay, so then there's also word problems. Those are going to be things like, two trains coming together, when do they meet? Or machines working on a production order at different rates, but when does the order get finished? They have a lot of overlapping groups, overlapping sets. How do you account for the people that are in both groups, or sometimes all three groups? They also do have things related to business, like profit and interest, but those are actually the exception. I mean, you have a few of those, but the test is not all about that. By the way, the formula for profit on the GMAT is sales minus cost equals profit. All right, so that's the math that you're going to be tested on. Now, they do test you in two ways. They have regular problem-solving questions, and then there's another question type that's probably around 40% of your questions. That other question type is called data sufficiency. This is a weird way to be asked a math problem. It takes some getting used to. But what they do is they ask the math problem without having given you enough information, and then they start feeding bits of information to you, and you have to be able to say when you actually have enough information to solve the problem. The funny thing is, though, you never have to solve the problem. You just need to know that it is solvable. So some students actually do end up enjoying those problems more than the regular problem solving, just because they don't actually have to solve the problem. They just have to understand the conceptual thing going on. Okay, so that's math. The verbal section on the test comprises three things, is comprised of three things. So essentially you're going to have sentence correction, which is just grammar, reading comprehension, which is kind of what you think it is, and then critical reasoning, which is kind of like mini reading passages, but much more based in logic. Okay, so we'll talk briefly about each of those. So the sentence correction, they give you a sentence with a portion underlined, and then 5 different versions of the underlined portion. Answer choice A, by the way, is always a repeat of what was actually up in the problem, and then B through E, swap it out for a new version. And so you're going to just try to find the one that's grammatically correct and the one that is the best said of those grammatically correct ones. So welcome back to high school. You've got to be paying attention to verb tense and subject-verb agreement and pronoun usage and misplaced modifiers and parallelism and sentence fragments. But you also need to really pay attention to things like, well, what was actually meant here? Did they use proper idioms? And was it clear and concise? So this actually takes a lot of work for a lot of students to get good at. It's something that most people have not studied for a while. And some people have taken a business writing course, but even then, you kind of have to learn what the GMAT's looking for. Okay. The reading comprehension, you're going to have several passages mixed through your verbal section. Each one will probably have 3 or 4 questions after it. The passages will be about almost anything, kind of science or history, sometimes a little bit businessy. But then the questions are going to be things like, what was the primary purpose? What did the author actually say? What can be inferred from the passage? What would the author agree with? Why did the author include this detail? What was the structure of the passage, or something like that? Okay, so that's the kind of what you're looking at in reading. And then there's the other one, critical reasoning, which is basically a 1-paragraph long reading passage, but it's more based in formal logic. So things like, how could I weaken or strengthen this argument? What's an assumption that was made in the argument above? What can be inferred from it? What was the role of this piece or pieces? What were the roles of these 2 pieces in the passage? How could you resolve an apparent discrepancy or an apparent paradox? So things along those lines. It definitely takes some getting used to really know what they're asking for and be able to answer them quickly and efficiently. Okay, so that's the math and the verbal section. By the way, those are by far the most important 2 sections on the GMAT. Those 2 sections, and not these ones, reflect your overall score. So the score that goes from 200 to 800 is a combination of your math and verbal skills. The essay and integrated reasoning are also reported separately, and the school can choose to use those in your admissions, or sometimes they don't. Now, some schools actually don't use them at all. Some schools ask you to take them, but they're not going to use them yet in their admissions. They're just kind of getting a feel for it. But some schools take them very seriously. Okay? So the essay is a half-hour long essay, and it's an analysis of an argument. Essentially, you're given someone else's paragraph, where in that paragraph they have used evidence to support a conclusion or recommendation. Your job is to write an essay pointing out how they failed, because they failed really badly on the test. So you're going to point out that they overlooked alternate explanations, they made questionable assumptions, they, just all those kind of logic things that can go wrong in an opinion piece. You're going to point it out. Now, you don't take the other side. You just kind of, point out how this person failed to make their point, but you just don't take the other side. Okay. Now, the essay, there's no required format. If you're in doubt, the 5-paragraph essay you learned in high school is a great way to go. Intro, body paragraphs, conclusion. But that's not required at all. Now, you're going to be graded on things like how well you make your points, how well you support your points, how well the passage was organized, paragraphs and connections and logical sequences and that sort of thing. You're also graded on syntactic variety. Now, that's kind of more like how you mix up your sentences, a mix of long and short. Good writing has a flow to it. It's not just all short and choppy. Okay? And then you're also graded on grammar. Now, you're going to be learning grammar as part of verbal, so don't make those mistakes as part of your essay. Okay? Now, the other section is integrated reasoning. Now, this is a half-hour long section with 12 questions. Now, I still consider it a new section. It came on the test in 2012. I guess that's not that new, but this is a section that's brilliantly written. It replaced a second essay that they used to have. Now they've got rid of that second essay, and the integrated reasoning is going to be essentially a mix of math and verbal with a lot of charts and graphs. Okay? The question formats are a little different than what you're going to see up in here. A lot of the skills you're going to learn as you're studying for math and verbal will help you as you're doing integrated reasoning, but you also really need to get used to integrated reasoning as its own kind of section and question types. There's one question type called two-part analysis, where most students, when they see their first question, they don't even know what's being asked. But once you've seen a couple dozen of them, you're like, okay, I've got it. My big recommendation is on essay and integrated reasoning. Now, they don't matter to your overall score as much as math and verbal, but if the schools care about them, you need to practice them. You'll be surprised how fast a half hour goes when you're writing your first essay. But after you've done, half a dozen essays, you kind of get the feel for it. You almost develop a template for yourself that you're going to be writing the same overall structure, even though the details of the passage are going to change. Okay? Same with integrated reasoning. Most students, when they first run into one of these sections, they do poorly. Not everybody, but a lot of students. But once you get used to it, this is not the worst section. Now, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here in this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel. And, you can also check out our website, testperfect.com. Now, so those are the things that are on the test. Now, in a future video, we're going to talk about how scoring works and how schools are going to look at all of that. But this is just kind of the overall format. Again, did you notice that it just doesn't have that much to do with business school? Now, I actually think it does, because I think the GMAT does a brilliant job of testing the background skills that make a good MBA candidate. So we'll talk about that in our next video. So check out our next video. Just it'll be linked up here. And if you want to find out more about our course, it'll be linked down here. Thank you.